to the true Christian works, Jesus said, "My people are destroyed, go to hell for lack of knowledge." Hosea, Hosea 4:6. Roman Catholic spokesmen are angry when the word of God is preached and say that they cannot believe that in this day and age there are still people preaching hatred, bias, and prejudice, etc. But what these Vatican ambassadors are really saying, though, is that they cannot believe in this day and age that there are still people preaching God's word and the truth, and there are still people that would have the guts to expose Satan, them. The backslidden, denominational churches that have merged with the Vatican say that nowhere in the Bible does God or his son Jesus Christ answer back or command their children to go back or to answer back. In the Bible, from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation, God, his son, Jesus Christ, patriarchs, prophets, disciples, and apostles answered Satan back on every point whatsoever or whenever his false doctrine came their way, who are commanded by Jesus to use the word or the sword, the word of God, to defend and to preserve the gospel by answering Satan back on every point with zeal and boldness. And we are commanded to answer back Satan's fallacies, twisting of the word, as Jesus did when he answered back to the devil on the mountain of temptation, Matthew 4:3 and 11. And Paul, by the Holy Spirit, said, "Preach the word, all the word." 2 Timothy 4:2. Don't leave out the scriptures regarding the Antichrist, the false prophets, answering back, rebuking, and reproving. Jesus said that we live, go to heaven to every word that proceeds from the mouth of the living God, Matthew 4:4. This means the words about the Antichrist, the false prophets, etc., because Jesus said, when we know the truth, all the truth, every word, the truth will set us free, John 8:32. But the Antichrist and the false prophets don't want you to be free because their master is Satan, who likes to keep people in bondage. And if they do not want the people the people to be in bondage, then why do they become so angry when the whole of God's word is preached, which sets you free from Satan? And why would they call preaching all the word evil, hatred, bias, and prejudice if they're not from Satan? The Antichrist and his false prophets will say that we are not doing anything concerning or serving God with passion. They say keeping God's commandments, preaching and doing God's words passionately is a sin. But in the book of Revelation, Jesus commands us to be zealous, and he will split us up or out or spit us out of his mouth. Revelation 3:16. Zeal and boldness, passion are the bylaws of God and his anointed. And we commanded to do whatever we do as unto our Lord with the whole heart, Matthew 22:37. And zeal, passion. And if people are offered by God's word any of it, God says that they are brutish like beasts. And God also says that being offended or rejecting his word is sin. To reject the word of God is to reject Christ, and it is only by our acceptance, belief of the word, which is Christ, that we become saved. Believe on the word of Jesus Christ, the word, and thou shalt be saved. Acts 16:31. The Vatican, through its mafia, first destroyed the morals of the country with pornography, prostitution, narcotics, manufacturing and distribution of alcohol, etc. Now, with false acts of piety, she is trying to bring in laws of censorship on all the smut that she herself has created in our nation and throughout the world. And this is the cult's deceptive, vile way to make you believe that she is good, decent, pure, and pious. And this is also her first attempt at worldwide censorship. Her second motive with this censorship will be to censor all speech, including the Bible, except the way that she wants the Bible preached, which is the exact opposite of the Bible. She knows that the world is not aware of her satanic ways of doing things, and the world that is not aware that she created all this smut and indecency in the first place will applaud her and worship her because of this premeditated, noble, quote unquote, act. This is to lure everyone that is ignorant to her and her devices away from the Lord unto her behalf, unto herself. The future plans that she has for her blind people is hell. Misery loves company, and Satan and her followers don't wish to burn alone. They want you, dear heart, to share her eternity with them in hell and torment. And do you want what they want for you, or do you want what Jesus has prepared for you, which is everlasting happiness with him, away from all evil, away from all deception, and away from all possibilities of all any kind of harm? Get right with God. That's an excerpt from the pastor that you know as World Pastor Tony Alamo. And though many of you know that the resentment of Jesus in the Bible is anthropomorphic for justice and also for the transits of the sun in cosmology, you also understand the three wise men who followed the stars dealing with the cosmos energies given anthropomorphic personalities and presented in the Bible as Jesus, guiding people to justice and guiding people to be just, etc. And so that is sharing with you some of Tony Alamo's words, etc., from his perspective, etc., that harmonizes with recognizing what is going on politically, particularly at North America in these days. And this was written during the time of President Reagan in that era of time. So that's in the early 80s. And so bringing it to you today and sharing it with you to show you how a lot of things are presented, have manifested into the politics that you see today, including the censorship. And so the idea of death and taxes is a fraud. It is actually the operations of the popes of Rome under the Inquisition that has never ended. And so you can see some of the problems that President um, Donald J. Trump is suffering from these same activities, etc. And a lot of the opposition is actually in these operations. So I'm not presenting this to you for to support it or to condemn it, but just to observe the eyes of others looking at the politics today. And so I shared with you some of Tony Alamo's words, etc., trusting that you will see through it and recognize the anthropomorphic angles, etc., and then get some good out of it to help in the great work of helping to uplift all humanity. But Dr. Naila, so we see that death and taxes is not a divine origin statement, but actually comes from the popes of Rome in their Inquisition operation.
I think it's important to stress that religion as we know it, we talked about ministers. We talked about, there's prime ministers and ministers of health and ministers of finance. And
ministers
so
of
labor, anything.
Minister of transportation.
So some people mistakenly take the word minister to mean something that's somehow holy or divine or set apart from the standpoint of an ethereal spiritual sense, and it's not.
It's just an administrator.
It's just an administrator.
Yeah.
And so we look at the same thing when it comes to the Vatican. The Vatican, because it seems to be the mother, quote unquote, mother church of the churches we know it.
Yes.
And we do church the way, like I was telling somebody just the other day, I said the rituals, for instance, of time, as I pastored every first Sunday, we did communion. And the Bible tells us as often as you do this in remembrance of me. It's supposed to be in remembrance of Jesus, Yeshua. But What we're really doing is perpetuating ritual of the
Fraud.
real fraudulent rituals of the real eating of human flesh and drinking of human blood.
Yes.
We didn't know that.
Yes.
So what we've been doing is working the magic, the dark magic for them, thinking that we were doing something that somehow brought us closer to quote unquote
Yes.
God. And so there is so much,
Because when you know, in harmony with what you're saying, when you really do an in-depth study of the Bible, Quran, and Torah, etc., you will recognize that actually the priesthood, be it the popes of Rome, have actually been on their major deceptive missionary work is to deceive the people in their views of these books and to create divisions amongst the people when all of the books can be traced back to the ancient Gnostic, Sabians or Saba, etc. of Africa, etc. And the misrepresentation and deception that has been used against the people has caused much of the problems that the people suffer today in the misunderstanding, and in the process, then convincing the people that their taxes or tithing was to God, Allah, Jesus, etc. When in actuality, all of it was going to the popes of Rome, to the Queen of England, etc. And so when you at a lot of people who actually do some research, just like World Pastor Tony Alamo, you can see that even if there's not a clarity on the anthropomorphic angle of the presentment of Berber culture, etc., coming from Africa, it has enough insight to see the prophetic metaphors that are presented to bring humanity out of darkness. And that is certainly appreciated.
right. I mean, because I won't want, we don't want to confuse what you just read with you either, like you're supporting a sort of Christian theological perspective. It's just that this
It's just an
pastor
sharing of information
was brave enough
to speak out
to speak out, and he used it in the sense of what he
where
in his
he
belief system
yes, where
from
he
his basic, but he realized that that which was the harlot, that which was the anti, was
Mhm.
what we were calling, the Vatican, the
Yes,
government, and all of these
and
things.
all the government agencies. And the major thing is that the average person, people, aren't aware that the government agencies are actually branches of the Vatican. And that's the greater value in Tony Alamo sharing his information. But while we all knew that, when it starts coming from a lot of the people, who are, well world renowned, like Tony Alamo, etc., it gives reinforcement to the truths that the people actually need to know and recognize that all of us have been injured by these de facto, because what he's really is exposing the de facto governing body, you know, and while we've been telling the people that those agencies are de facto, this is a demonstration from the insight of a world pastor that's actually exposing it also. So look at it as a support for the good and the liberation of humanity, in spite of any what you call conceptual flaws. Certainly, you can see in the heart of hearts he's doing the best he can to tell the truth to help. And again, that's appreciated and respected.
Now the thing, you talked about, the topic was death and taxes.
Yes.
And we were told the only two things are for certain. I want to go back to death.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about the fact that the fear factor
Mm-hmm.
of a natural process in what we go through, what we've been going through, fear,
Okay,
what we go through naturally, fear has been introduced as a
Mhm.
way of
Control.
controlling the people. And there is, like when I said earlier, yes, it's half truth, half lie,
Mm-hmm.
because death in a sense is certain, but it's not really death, it's transition.
It's transition.
And taxes are like, if you accept it,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really certain, it's something that's been fraudulently
They've
placed
been
upon the
using
people.
the Bible actually to enslave humanity and interjecting the Roman Catholic agenda under the guise of Christianity. And people who've done research also know that this is back to where we've been telling people over the years about the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, and people are looking at that as not knowing that that is the operations of the Popes of Rome actually setting up their death cult against humanity. And this is why it's also important for people to know that the true Christianity is the Gnostics of Africa. And a sect of the Gnostics, of the Sabian Gnostics, is Verdun, which is Islam. And so by people not knowing that, they've allowed the dark priesthood to actually pit the different sects of people against each other, thinking that they're different religions when they have one origin. And this is again why it's important for people to know, that if you want to do research into those books, you must have some knowledge of linguistic transformation, which you call how language or names or come from one language to another in different territories, and how when you're looking at these different metaphors and peoples in the books, that if you want to understand a lot of the philosophies, you must study the culture of the people, the traditions of the people, so that you're not deceived by the priesthood. And as we can see all over the world among Muslims, Christians, and Jews, you see much confusion, much hatred, and it actually had been promoted by Rome, and the people weren't suspecting it, and they're fighting.
Yeah, but death, I think we need, that's why when someone's loved one, passes on, passes form, and many of us are more careful now to say, the transition, because death has a final connotation to it, whereas it's a transition, because that's just a change, from one state, it goes from one state or to another, or one condition.
To be born in the physical body is the spirit dying into another form, transiting into another form of life.
I always see the birth process as the fall. It's sort of the fall, because we come down from a lofty spiritual space into a physical. That was the fall of.
So you have them, what, spiritual beings having a physical experience.
Absolutely. So
human.
But when you put the fear in there of death,
then
and the financial
people away from
not only does it do that, but let's talk about the church. I want to speak from my experience as a pastor, if you will, if I may. Yeah. The one and done theory, or the premise that if you don't get it right this time, you're going to go to hell, is what the Roman Catholic.
Not true.
Yeah, but what the Roman Catholic Church, while they created a place called purgatory, because what they would do is, there would be so much uncertainty of whether or not a person's loved one made it in, so to speak. Yeah. So they create this place called purgatory, which is still another financial venue, because what the family would have to do was they would pay for novellas, they would pay for candles, they would pay for prayers, and all of this stuff to pray their loved ones out of purgatory. So they had these various levels. And then, of course, on the physical level, what became what was physical, which was to throw you in the debtor's prison, which was hell, then became morphed into this eternal hellfire where you would burn forever. But we know that executor chamber is what was called hell.
Yes, and it's really those tunnels that they have
underground
under the churches, and a lot of people haven't been. They're becoming exposed to people who haven't done research, exposed to them more now and lately, which is another reason why I'm sharing some of Olamo's statements, although it could go further, and people don't know that was and is the hell. that it actually is tunnels under those old churches, and the pits are for those who didn't pay the tithing or the taxes to the IRS.
They would throw them.
Why they've been taking all of people's goods, stealing their accounts, etc., under the guise of having sovereign authority of government, when in fact they were not creatures of the Constitution. They're not creatures of the treaties. They were indeed creatures of the papacy, of the Vatican, under the God of this world, of government ordinance departments of the Inquisition, run by the popes of Rome and the mafia, and that is the truth. And this is what has happened particularly at North America.
Yeah, and the other thing about the fear of death and hell is the fact that they didn't want people. Our ancient religions believed in reincarnation. They would look at a baby and you could say, tell that this child coming in was an old soul returning, but they kind of took that out of Christianity because they watered that down, even though there's still stuff in the Bible, that suggests a reincarnation, but yet they would downplay it because this is my feelings. I felt that the reason why they did that is because if you only thought you had one chance, and they could soak you for all that you were worth in each life that you came in, especially if you forgot the previous lifetime that you'd been here before. If you knew you were going to come back over and over again, and it was some of the things that were put on you as these were things you had to do in order to make it, and you'd be I'll be back one way or another. You wouldn't fear because you know you'd been here before and you'd be again.
Also, you would understand the ancient Nicene, the ancient Gnostic philosophy that there is no death to man. There's only transformation, etc. And then also, as we shared, Alamo's perspective, we can go back to, the commentary on the letter by the Pope of Rome to President Obama, that we've shared with people on the flash drive over the years. And you can see the operations are still going on today. And that death and taxes, is not, because you can refer to the death cult as really them creating suffering for humanity. The death of peace, the death of happiness, the death of you having right to your own labor, etc. And this is why, again, it's important to look at, the Organic Act of Congress 1871 and understand that the persons in the Congress, etc., for the United States who murdered Lincoln were actually members of the death cult of the Roman Curia. And those operations affect us to this very day. So again, let's look at some commentary on the letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, which is more in contemporary times, that's in harmony with the things that were said by Obama. Now, the original de jure Constitution and the government for the United States of America, that's a small U, and that is the political platform of government that come out of its republic form via, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between Morocco and the hybrid Europeans, etc., and the original United States, etc., at North America. And that government at North America, having a Republican form of government, was set forth and established at Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. And as you know, that Constitution was adopted from Annecy Confederation of Moors at the north. And the treaties and the Constitution stands as a supreme law of the land. Now, that organic Constitution to which these German tribes, hybrid tribes, were obligated, that was altered and acts of misprision by acts of misprision and was secretly overthrown and converted into a foreign privately owned and deemed for profit corporation in the year 1871. And for those of you who are sharing with us tonight at the House of Reawakening Minds, you do research on the Act of Congress 1871. Thank you.
That's mine.
Give me.
I wanted you.
I want some of that.
But I want you to see what it says.
Yes, 1871. Yeah. That's sparkling water, right?
That's the water from the spring that they brought.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that there is
synchronicity.
Synchronicity. Yeah. Since 1871.
1871. Yeah. On the bottle cap. Now, that Act of Congress of 1871 was an act of misprision by and the foreign feudal law entity, which was born of treaty treason, was filed as the United States Corporation Company, which is now commonly referred to as the U.S. democracy. That's important for people to know that. And so, by them not knowing that corporate platform was actually the Roman Curia operations of the Jesuit order of the Inquisition. And it's interesting how you can even give people copies of the corporation papers for the United States Corporation, but they have been brain trained into thinking that the United States U.S. democracy is the physical aggregate body politic country, which it was not and is not, and actually belongs to the Vatican. And it's really interesting how, while all of that is documented, how difficult it is to get people to do the research and to look at this information on their own and change their state of mind. They recognize that taxes are not inevitable and that they actually never apply to them.
That's probably what a lot of people are wondering. So if they do not apply to us, how do we avoid them, circumvent them, get out of, not be entangled with?
Get out from under her.
That but how?
I'm talking jurisdiction.
Oh,
jurisdiction. Okay. So now you got to look at what we talked about before. Linguistic capital, which is where they use the capital letters writing people's names, which the people don't know, and grammar designates them as a corpse or the dead. And then, of course, the vampire lives off the blood of the dead. And this is another expression in the rituals that they use of sacrificing actual human bodies and drinking their blood, where they do the ritual of the cracker, and then they say the wine represents the
communion.
Blood, actually, communion. Yes, communion. And most people never suspected that this was actually a ritual of their actual
human sacrifice,
of torturing humans, etc. But again, not knowing that the government agencies that they've been calling government were actually subdivisionals of the Vatican. So you can see why almost every time the so-called city councils and legislators for the United States or their subdivisional states of entities, every time they make a legislation, it's always a tax attack against the people. And it hasn't dawned on the people that these people were vampiring them. They were never serving the people. They're serving themselves under the Inquisition. And the IRS is their collection arm. And the fact that people thought that the IRS is some recent thing that, that was set up, during the 1913 operations of Woodrow Wilson administration to counter Noble Ali's establishment of the old Canaanite temple to restore the estates of the Moors, particularly in North America, and then to the world. And much of that will be expressed in the divine warning by the prophet to the nations, to wake the people up. And that was one of the major organizational countermeasures to the Inquisition operations of the Popes of Rome and the IRS, which is used even to this day to impoverish the people and to steal their resources and their labors. And of course, people would join labor unions not knowing that the labor unions were actually part of the Vatican. And so you can see over the years how the labor unions have actually betrayed the workers and actually been used against the workers not knowing that the leaders of these unions were actually in corporate bed with the corporations, and all of them were designed to drain the resources of the people in the name of helping the people. The same way that the priesthood, under the name of the 501c3 Lyndon Baines Johnson Skull and Bones Agreement, thought that they were, tax exempt because they were honoring Jesus and not knowing that actually they were just simply military operations of the popes of Rome for controlling the people, etc., and exploiting them. It's really interesting, and so much of the confusion that people have in relationship to what they thought religion was is in itself an important aspect of study for helping to redeem humanity. And again, that's why it's important for people to understand the politics of what they thought was government operating today in these contemporary times is really not in service to the people, but the people themselves were actually being served up by these people, etc. And that death and taxes were causing injury to the people who did not serve the popes of Rome, etc. Were jailed. Now they have a better understanding and comprehension of the POW camps that are actually instituted across the land, and which are really private POW camps of the Popes of Rome and members of the Roman Curia under the guise of U.S. government agencies, when actually they're attacks on Aboriginal indigenous people, mainly under Inquisition operations. And that continues to this very day. And so, again, in relationship to people making what we call claim of reversion of their estates and putting all of their property and the fruits of their labor in trust to start protecting it from these pseudo, de facto pseudo government agencies that they thought were creatures of the Constitution and treaties, which they are absolutely not. Once that is comprehended by the people themselves can start intelligently speaking up and stop volunteering into the tithing system of the IRS and making contracts with them that create liabilities against their own estate that the people, for the most part, was not aware that the estate not only included land, air, and water, and their physical property, but also their rights and their liberties, which is again why civics as a general rule has not been taught, or you'll see people who are party to the dark priesthood will condemn anyone who teaches civics and constitutional principles because it exposes the fraud of the circle, church, and chancery of the chambers of hell coming from the Vatican that is operative in almost every government on the planet. And of course, this is why as they have drained all of the labor and resources from the people, that you have the institutions that the people have trusted in, invested themselves in, collapsing because they pretty much drained the carcass and now they're ready to sacrifice the people. People need to know that that's what the agenda is under the guise of New World Order. And so again, just like when you see when the letter to from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, they'll close out. I'll read the first paragraph and the last paragraph of the letter. And those of you who've been sharing with us in the House of Reawakening Minds, you'll find this letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama. You'll find it on your flash drive. And so I'll share the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Pope Francis sends Obama powerful letter via attorney, July the 4th, 2014. Civil orders, July the 4th, 2014. This letter is issued to all members of the domestic police forces, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Provost Marshal, members of the American Bar Association, and the American Armed Services. And these organic American states of the Union, known as the United States of America, Major, exercising plenary civil power upon the land, hereby appoint General Carter F. Ham to lead and command the Grand Army of the Republic, with the acronym GAR, and its successors under the guidance of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with their full support. Now I'm going to read the last paragraph to this letter. And again, those of you who are sharing with us on the House of Reawakening Minds can refer to your flash drive and get the letter in full. And you'll see how this relates to Alamo's statements and also the historical facts that we've been sharing with you all over the years, etc. But this would give you insight into the concepts and the misinformation platforms that have been presented in the social fabric lately. All legal fiction entities, however structured and named after the American states and the American state citizens, are returned to them and their control, free and clear of any debt, promise, encumbrance, or obligation alleged against them as a result of false claims made in their behalf, quote unquote, by officers of the United States of America Incorporated and the United States Incorporated, all capital letters, or by any foreign officials operating the United States of America minor or the United Nations city-state, falsely claiming to quote unquote represent them or to have jurisdiction over them. We note that the current circumstance is in part the result of criminal acts engaged in 150 years ago, which resulted in the commercial enslavement of African Americans who were summarily claimed as chattels back in U.S. government debt in wake of the Civil War. And despite every act of abolition and declaration of prohibition against both peonage and slavery, it has been the policy of the U.S. government to enslave its citizens and to operate as a rogue state among the nations of the world. And instead of freeing African Americans, the sum total result of the Civil War was to vastly expand public sector ownership of slaves, giving rise to the outrageous and improper claims that have been made against the American states and the American state citizens that we are dealing with today. It is uniquely fitting that the Grand Army of the Republic is recalled to settle this circumstance in favor of the people. Attachments: Civil Orders, Anna Maria Wilhelmina, Hanna Sophia Ritzinger von Ritzenstein von Letlow Verbeck, private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Francis. Documents: The United States isn't a country, it is a corporation, the hidden Vatican Crown Empire. This is included in the letter sent to Barack H. Obama. And you'll find this letter on your flash drive that most of you have gotten from Dr. Naila on the House of Reawakening Minds. And you can read it in full yourself and see it in harmony also with what was shared with Alamo in his article that he wrote during the Reagan administration, which I shared with you, etc. And so you can see today people are becoming more and more conscious of the real and actual politics that has actually been injuring the people, not supporting the people. It's actually been robbing the people, not supporting the people. That has actually been criminally stealing the people's estates and their labor, not serving the people. But in fact, we're serving the people up to injury, serving people up to poverty, serving the people up to torture, serving the people up to human trafficking, etc., and bloodletting, etc. In fact, up to this very day. So we have a lot of work to do in relationship to helping to liberate fallen humanity, which is why some of these subject matters that a lot of people won't deal with, we deal with them at the House of Reawakening Minds, with the uplifting of fallen humanity. And this gives you some insight into the politics that you see taking place around the world, and a lot of these um, constructed, planned, and strategically executed so-called race problems that they're having around the planet to cause division and destruction, etc. These are inquisition operations. I yield the floor to you, Dr. Nayo.
I'm going to look to see if there are any burning questions that you like. There are a lot of comments, but while I'm looking, this will be a good time for any questions. I know some of you have been writing in the chat, but unfortunately, what happens as the chat responses come in, some of the older ones I can't get to. So I'm trying to.
We apologize for not being able to respond to all the chat because there's so many people from around the world that listen to the House of Reawakening Minds. And of course, we can't get to all of them, so we try to deal with answering some of the generalized overall questions and concerns of the people to the degree that we can share any thoughts of for helping or uplifting the people. But again, one of the problems that we had was that, again, that the people, many of the people just didn't know that the United States is not a country. That it's a private corporation belonging to the Popes of Rome that has been occupying under Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere. And that would include Canada Corporation and the United States Corporation operations, and then branched out against the rest of the people of the world. That's the truth. Unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. So, for us to solve problems, both political and economic of the world, we got to know the source of the problem. And much of that source has been shared with you tonight. Not that it hasn't been shared with you before, but because when you see a lot of your hybrid Europeans, and priests starting to tell some of the truths, because they're being injured now too. That gives people encouragement to, or helps people to be encouraged to start studying and researching for themselves and not accepting what we say without research. We always encourage you to do your own study and research and find out for yourself. Logically, as your minds change due to being made aware of things that prior to exposing of these things, some of you didn't know, the changing of your mind will change the conditions and the way that you communicate with a lot of these agencies that you thought was government, and discovering that they're actually circle church curia members of the Vatican that were actually waging war on you, the people. And a lot of people that thought that these agencies were just waging war on the Aboriginal people have found out that they've been sacrificing them, etc. And this is again why you see a lot of the hybrid Europeans starting to tell a lot of the political truths that would not be in the mainstream news venues, etc., because they're being thrown under the bus. But it also demonstrates to you that they knew this stuff all the time. But when they were benefiting from the fraud of the U.S. democracy, they weren't telling our people anything, were they? They were talking about, vote for this platform, vote the Democratic Party, etc., not knowing that these were actually Klan members of the Knights of Columbus under the Vatican operations to actually overthrow the Republic, which is why you won't see the political operatives under the Vatican order refer to the Republic order of the Constitution. They will always refer to the U.S. democracy, which is actually a demon platform for the papacy. And of course, We don't have to tell you about the injuries that they've been causing on the people, because the evidence is you know is self evident. You don't even have to do deep research. All you got to do is go to all the communities and look at the miseries and the suffering and the broken families and the drug problems and the alcohol problems and the people being murdered on the street by people that they thought were law officers, etc. And now these are operations of Rome. The setup. Unfortunate truth, but it's
Here
you
is a
can't fix anything if you don't start recognizing what the origin.
here is a question.
Yeah.
Edie Bay, how can we do the reversion of state as individuals prior to / while forming government structure?
It's sort of like once you start cleaning things up, it's like things fall in place. We don't need to so much reinvent the wheel. We need to clean the wheel up, clean the wagon up, and take it out. As an example, let me give you an example. People not knowing the true history of Iberia or Europe, etc., are under the in general impression that after Napoleonic Wars, their perception is that Europe is dealing mostly with Albion Paleolithic Europeans, or what we call modern man, when in fact the original Europeans are Iberians, etc., or Moors. Picts, the Dubs, the Moors. That's why when you do research into Phoenicia or Iberia, which is actually the European peninsula, you'll see all the coats of arms of the nobles that were overthrown. And you're going back to Napoleon and the Napoleonic Wars, you'll find that they were all Moors. All the coats of arms. And then those of you who do have some, what you would call relatively comprehensive libraries, you can go into some of the work of Joel A. Rogers, who's one of the most awarded scholars of Nature Knows No Color Line. And you will also see the coats of arms of Iberia or Europe, and they're actually Moors. George Massey is another scholar
Gerald
whose work,
Gerald Massey.
Gerald Massey, yeah. And there's others, but most of our people have been, spooked away from, reestablishing libraries because the church, through the popes of Rome, have been for so many years burning books, banning books, with their expurgatorius and prohibitorum policies of the Inquisition. And so in the last maybe 7 or 8 generations of the Aboriginal people, contrary to our own culture, very few of our people have libraries in their homes anymore. And then they only, by training, have only been accepting, say, Bibles, Korans, and Torahs as the only books that they were allowed to read. And so their concepts are usually corrupted or wrong by virtue of not having a balanced knowledge of the traditions and customs from which these books, that they call holy books, have their origin. And so it has allowed the papacy operators of the Roman Curia to misrepresent the books to the people, and which has caused a lot of the schism and secularism that people have been suffering from, in society, and this disorder and disruption and this falsely grounded hatred in the name of religions, because people don't get religion, they get dogma. That also must be corrected by the scholars and the people who have goodwill for humanity to tell the truth. And so the truth was told not to reject anyone, but to put things back in their proper perspective, so that the people have a true perspective of names of lands and peoples prior to colonial inquisition operations, etc. Whereas much of the knowledge was suppressed and the real history was reconstructed. And they'll call it reconstruction. And people think they're talking about buildings when they're really reconstructing society. And much of this reconstruction has taken place since the Napoleonic Wars, but has accelerated since the mid 1800s. Now that's a fact. And of course, going back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers will aid you in correcting your concepts about humanity and about the nations of the earth and about international interchange and international trade, which is at the root of much of these wars that the hybrids have been waging and having much to do with their privacy operations and their piracy operations through bottomry instruments like the marriage certificates and the birth certificates bond system created by the Jesuits of Rome to steal the people's estates and their inheritances, etc. And that's again why all of it is done under admiralty and maritime law, because they're not really the people of the land. This is in the constitutions and treaties are dealing with what you call law of the land and the jurisdiction of the land. So they take the people out to sea only on paper through what you would call linguistic and connotative instruments and capitolium or capital. This is why they use the capital letters when they make reference to people and trick people into volunteering their states to the U.S. corporation that they thought was the legitimate government, really the private corporation of the Jesuit order, who answers to the Pope of Rome with the support helping of the barristers of the British Accredited Registry from Fleet Street, England, which most of you already know. And this is where that tie between Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, Queen of England, and the Vatican, with those three stars, that's what that's all about. Modern day Inquisition enforcement by the IRS, stealing the people's resources and draining them, then sacrificing them. And so death and taxes, death of your life, of your political life, via the IRS and via three-letter government agencies, etc., and the taxation imposed, which is disguised tithing to the popes of Rome, all of it is a fraud. Therefore, it is not inevitable. And logically, this is again why the brand system was instituted to take the people out of their proper person, by which they can declare the people civilly dead, though they were not physically dead. And this is where the term civil iter mortuus comes in. And of course, the 14th Amendment person, or the man of straw, that people refer to as the all capital letters, etc. And also why the all capital letters is not used, and why when they present an instrument to you in the all caps, they're making reference to the admiralty, maritime, or fictional estate that they created on the seas. And this is, again, they go from SEAC to SEEC, the Holy See, of the Pope of Rome pretending to be Horus, or imitating, or what you call calling themselves the vicar or the substitute. So everything they do is really what you would call a fictional substitute of reality. And this is where deception comes in. That's why you don't use the all caps.
I just want to interject. When people order USB drives, and the system we use through PayPal to create the mailing labels, put the information in all lowercase or initial caps or all lowercase.
Yeah.
When it comes out as a label, it's all caps. You can't change it. You can't.
They make it.
You can't. You know. So I want folks to know that when they get an all caps mailing label, I didn't all cap it.
Yeah, they will do that.
The system automatically all caps it.
This is what people need to know, that that the heads of the post offices, etc., are Roman Curia members, and that is done within. And all the institutions have been infiltrated. This is again why it's important for people at large to become cognizant of what's going on, so that you, the people, can yourself start talking about reversion of the state. And this is also where Noble Drawley, the illustrious prophet of these days, make reference to the lost estate and the restoration of your birthright, your nationality, and your birthright. And logically, once you understand birthright, you must understand that you're dealing with civil issues of estate and inheritance if you're going to deal with these matters. Then, of course, you understand trust. Why trusts are so vital in relationship, and also why when these de facto and pseudo men and women running these pseudo government agencies write to you through the mail, through the U.S. mail, and they have a corporation name in all caps that they're actually attacking you. You need to know that. And most of you need to learn how to write rich, because rich just means written instruments, and you rebut that for them to correct that. Because actually what they're doing, you're talking to the dead. They're claiming you dead. Now let's back to the Inquisition operation. And it's done through U.S. agencies because the U.S. agencies actually are the Vatican. Here we go.
Here's a question from a Mentor L. Wants to know about France versus United States, 1952.
France versus?
Yeah, France v. United States, 1952.
Oh, where they made claim, and they're making claim on territories in the north, etc. And in fact, the United States corporation actually lost in that claim. You know that, right?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, yes, people need to know that. Yeah, there was a case that come for the international venues, and the U.S. really lost. And of course, they won't teach those things in the public because logically it would expose that these people who have been governing you are de facto, and the concepts that they've taught you in history is also fraud.
So what was the case? What was the case based on? What was it?
Claims on the land. Claims of the land.
So was this France, the so-called country, or was it someone whose name was France?
Yeah, France. And the United States presenting itself, the owners presenting it as a country, when in fact it's a private corporation. Of course, they lost, but they won't speak on that because it exposes the fraud. And as a matter of fact, in the future we'll go over that case as a commentary in the future into details for the benefit of the people. Because that's a study within itself.
How do I get the flash drive and be approved? House of RAM. I've been posting. People are asking about the flash drive. If you look, it's the USD drive that every time you see me put up USD, I'm telling you how to order. So when you see that banner, I'll put it up again. And you're part of House of Reawakening Minds just because you are who you are. We don't have a membership organization.
The state of is a state of political affairs.
State of being. Is be. Is be, and you are. That's the best way I can explain that.
Because the major, it's sort of like Noble Raleigh says, he came to make you priests unto yourselves. In other words, the real deal of it is part of the work of Noble Raleigh is actually to expose the corruption of the priesthood and present such knowledge as would liberate the people to become their own priests. Because they only lack knowledge. And that's the truth. And this is why a lot of people get confused when they become aware of the Moorish movement. They get confused about different people making different statements about Noble Raleigh, and they start worshiping him rather than paying attention to what he said when he actually came to liberate us and to redeem us from ignorance and from the lower self-principles of character by taking us back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers and putting us on a path of study that will reveal a lot more than you think that you know. That's why also he said the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you go back to sleep. And those of you who over the years started going into the scholarship, start recognizing immediately how deep in darkness we were, and how deep in darkness and ignorance many of your family members were, that you may have assumed to be intelligent, that we were building our lives around a false paradigm for generations. And of course, that caused injury, schism, and destruction to our families and to the youth. However, it's our duty and responsibility to take responsibility and start fixing this thing. If you're breathing, you still can achieve.
Let me see. Here's some where's that? Questions. Someone wants to know.
Now, for those of you who have that the letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, this is where the nations of the earth, as we've been telling you all for the last 7 or 8 years, that the nation of the earth will stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, then you'll understand the bonding system that was set up in 1861, what the Pope was making reference to about that 150 years ago, criminality, etc. And so by the bond systems, or by the nations stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, which are actually put on the backs of the Moors, etc., who they tagged as African Americans, when Africa is America. America is Africa. And that's the truth. The deal of it is that nations stop buying them. And so this is really, again, one, and it's not just the buying habits. It's another one of the reasons why many of your malls at North America started closing up. Those master malls all over the place, because they could not re-up, meaning that the nations gradually stopped accepting trade under the U.S. corporation private commercial paper petrodollar tied to the priesthood of the bishoprics of Rome, etc. So you've got to recognize that the nations of the world look at the U.S. Federal Reserve note differently than the people here do, because they already know that it's a fictional instrument of private debt fakery put upon the people by force of arms, and that it actually belongs to the Jesuits, which is another basic reason why that no accounts opened up with Federal Reserve notes belong to the people that account. It belongs to the banks. Is again why they can go into those accounts and take people's fiat that represent their labor trade at will without the people having any say so. And this is also why they can do things to the people, considering them as dead under the unum sanctum operations, and force nanovirus marks upon them under vaccines, etc., because they're claimed as dead in the first instance. This is again why it's important for people to make public reversion of the state, and it has to be in appropriate persona in their proper. And that's back to nationalization and principles of nationalization all over the world, not just here at North America. However, North America is the most destitute in relationship to knowledge of pedigree and traditions and customs. This is another reason why so much of this information is focused on the Moors of North America. Not because you're the only one, because you need it the most, actually.
Someone asked, who's a whore? Who's I don't want to mess with the appellation. What is the relationship with Hagia Sophia in relation to the Moors? It looks like Moorish architecture.
Sophia?
Yeah.
So you're looking at Hagar?
Sophia? No, the structure.
The dome.
The dome, yeah. In Turkey.
It's on the borderline.
But it looks like Moorish architecture.
Of course it is. Of course it is. There's no secret. That's really no secret.
So the relationship to the Moors built it, constructed it, right?
So you're looking at the borderline between Asia and Africa. That's on the borderline. And you go back to the battles between Hannibal, Hasdrubal, Barca Bey, etc., and the military clashes between the Constantinians hiding under the name of Christian. You got to remember, Muslims are Christian.
Well, they say it was built as a Christian.
They say so, and you see it going back over the centuries, going back and forth
as a Christian basilica.
In these wars. Then it'd be a mosque. Then it'd be a church. Then it'd be a temple. Then it'd be a mosque, church. You'll see the history.
It'd be Negro, black, colored, African American. It changes
a lot of history.
Changes a lot.
It exposed a lot of history. Yes, it will.
Rush L says, "How do we replace fiat?" You know, I can answer that, but go ahead and answer it.
Fiat is related.
How do we replace it? How do we replace it?
You don't replace it. You claim your estate. See, the work that's going on today all over the world is the restoration of the lost estate of humanity. And when you see so much focus put on the Moors of North America, it is because we are the hub of the target of the Inquisition. It just spread to others. But the foundation of the Inquisition operation was against the Moors. And then you go to the Spanish Inquisition, Roman Inquisition, and you go to the Napoleonic Wars, etc., and they all lead to attacks of the Khazarians, guised or pretending to be Jews, attacking the wealthy Asiatic and Africans and taking over Iberia, taking over Europe. And the subsequent wars that you see take place is reflection of those continued wars. They will change the names of both people and land